we do obviously have to get to the news of the day, which is the Cleveland Browns canning Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley from that office. So we'll definitely be touching on that a little bit as well. We're going to hit on that when Evan joins us in about 15 minutes. I want to let you know off the top that over at Sharp Football Stats, all the data is updated. We will touch on the Colts, definitely. All the statistics are updated. Everything is up to date, including next week's game. So, when you look at the strength of schedule and it says current week, updated as of, it's already updated through week 8. So next week is week 9. So you could start playing with that. We are going to talk about the opportunity index as well, which is something I devised last week. We're going to go ahead and share how that did the first week of sharing it with you all. And then we're obviously going to touch on that and keep updating it through the weeks because I think it's going to be pretty useful for you. So we'll just go ahead and go in order here. First up is the last game that we saw, the Minnesota Vikings. A very frustrating game. Yeah, I've got a lot of screens here. Some you can't even see, most you can't even see. So the Minnesota Vikings, they have they're going up against the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints have the #1 run defense in the NFL. The Vikings have the number 26 run offense. So right there is a huge red flag if you're going to try to run the ball here. You already have shown over the first 7 weeks of the season that you're not equipped to run the ball. Now you're going up against obviously the most difficult run defense that you faced to date. Next up, you realize that the New Orleans Saints have the number 30 ranked pass defense. And they have the number 30 ranked pass defense despite playing this laundry list of quarterbacks, and I do use the term laundry with meaning. Joe Flacco, Alex Smith, Eli Manning, Tyrod Taylor, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Matt Ryan. Now, Matt Ryan, slightly different category. He's obviously not the upper echelon of the league, but he obviously is still very good. And these other guys, though, clearly not of any caliber that you should be fearful of. So, in the first half, Kirk Cousins produces these ridiculous numbers passing the ball. 9.9 yards per attempt. He has a 79% completion rate, a 50% success rate, and a 126 passer rating. Now, to compare that with Drew Brees, and we'll talk about the Saints offense in a second, Drew Brees had a 77% completion rate in the first half, but only 4.9 yards per attempt. So, we had a larger completion rate, a higher completion rate, 79% for Kirk Cousins, and 9.9 yards per attempt. Way better than what Drew Brees was doing. So this offensive passing game is clicking, is humming. You enter the third quarter, okay? And I always love to look at early downs because third down's reactionary. Early downs is what tell you what the team's trying to do. They were losing the entirety of the third quarter by a margin between a score of 17-13 or as large as 27-13. This is their deficit throughout the course of the third quarter. And yet on early downs in the third quarter, inexplicably against the #1 run defense, despite Kirk Cousins passing for 9.9 yards per attempt and completing 79% of his passes, the Minnesota Vikings choose to run the football 58% of the time on early downs. How do we think they did? Well, not surprisingly, you're going up against the #1 defense and your own rushing offense is horrific. So 3.4 yards per carry and a 29% success rate. Horrible play calling. Absolutely ridiculous. I had no clue the strategy that Minnesota went into the locker room being down to an offense like the New Orleans Saints with a secondary like they had, the health of that secondary. They were down 3 starters from the beginning of the year basically, and they were expecting to come back in the game when their defense is giving up yards to Drew Brees, to come back in the game with this type of strategy to run the ball against the #1 run defense. Made absolutely no sense. Now, the other thing, this had no outcome on the actual fact that they didn't win this game, but the other thing about this offense is you need to call intelligent plays. And you need to work with your quarterback. You need to understand who you're dealing with. Kirk Cousins, he lacks some situational awareness from time to time. We all probably saw the time in DC where he took the snap and kneeled right before halftime instead of spiking the ball. He kind of loses himself sometimes. So if you're an offensive coach, you have to be on this guy and grill him on what you need to do. You need to dial everything up to a T. This is what we need and expect in each of these situations. So look at what he does here. Okay. They are down 30-13. It's the fourth quarter and there's just over 9 minutes left. How in the world can you afford to take a 5-minute drive to get a touchdown? A 5-minute drive. You don't have time to take 5 minutes to score a touchdown. You really don't against Drew Brees. They threw 11 passes. 10 of those 11 passes were short. Short passes within 15 yards of the line of scrimmage. Some were incomplete, some were complete. None of them produced explosive gains. They're just slowly matriculating the ball. This is the type of drive that a team who is winning is looking to do to ice the game. Not a team that's down 30-13. You cannot afford to have a drive like this. They gave the ball back to the Saints, still down multiple scores with only 4.5 minutes left. So Drew Brees can burn off that time. And let's keep going. They have, in this drive, before they score the touchdown, they huddle up and read a wristband at the goal line to tell them to go to a quarterback sneak. He also uses motion on that play. As the clock's ticking, the game clock is ticking. So here's the situation. The guy's tackled before they call the sneak with 5 minutes and 34 seconds left at the goal line. They don't snap the ball on the sneak until 5:03. Over 31 seconds pass before they take their next snap and try a sneak for the quarterback. Does nobody watch the Patriots and Tom Brady and the most efficient way to quarterback sneak it? You just get the ball at the line of scrimmage and you sneak it. You don't take 31 minutes and bend down, huddle up your guys, and look at your wristband to call out, we want to do a quarterback sneak. And then after that sneak, it's fourth down. They obviously don't get it. They don't snap the next ball until 4 minutes and 31 seconds left, 32 seconds later. The time management, they waste over a minute at the goal line running 2 plays, one of which is a QB sneak. And they wonder why they didn't win. Now, the last thing before we move on to a different subject, this is for all teams. For all teams need to understand this. When you have less than a minute left and you're down a score and you need to score to come back, in their case they were down by 10 points, if you complete a pass and get a first down, you must spike the ball. You cannot afford to screw around at the line of scrimmage and call out a play to your receivers using hand motion or audibles. You do not have the time to do that. Because guess what? Yes, you're burning the first down, so you have to go to second down. But if you go from second down to third down, now to fourth down, and you can't get anything done, you're losing that game anyways. It does not matter. The downs do not matter. If you cannot get a first down on second or third or fourth down, too much time will have expired anyways, and you won't have gained any yards, so you're done. You're dead. So when they passed the ball, they made a big gain. I think it's like a 25-yard pass play to Kyle Rudolph. Got down to the 43-yard line, their own 43, with 42 seconds left. They have no timeouts. They don't call their next play. They don't snap it until 23 seconds are left in the game. So they screw around at that line of scrimmage, 19 seconds. I mean, obviously they have to get to the line, but then they're sitting there yelling out what we're going to do. You cannot afford to do that. That's not going to get you back into the game. You can't afford checkdowns. You can't afford that. It's just absolutely ridiculous. That game plan from the Vikings reeked. Just was horrendous. The stench was terrible from that game plan from the Vikings. Let's talk a little bit about the Indianapolis Colts offensive line before Evan calls in here. The last sack of Andrew Luck was back on October 4th, the very first play against the New England Patriots. They've had 4 weeks of games where they only had 1 sack the very first play. Insane how good this offensive line is playing right now. In 4 games, okay, now we know that the Colts, they're a pass-first team. They can't really run the ball, right? That's how they started off the season. Guess what? They got an offensive lineman back. They have the number 2 success rate rushing the football in the NFL the last 4 weeks. Number 2 best, 60%. And guess what? They're still 52% successful when they pass the ball. That's the 7th best in the league. I really like where this team is. They have a bye this week. Andrew Luck, he's just like Carson Wentz. They weren't going to be healthy to start the year. I mean, they had to work themselves into it. but now Andrew Luck is into the groove with this offense, working with Frank Reich, understanding everything that needs to happen. They are in a good position. Not going to win this year probably, but I bet they're going to finish out the season pretty strongly. And they've got a decent defense. I don't think they're making the playoffs this year. But I will say that AFC South is completely up for grabs. Jacksonville, spiraling. Tennessee, I still don't know if they've got a quarterback. Houston, that's the team obviously that's on a roll, right? That's the team that can run the ball now. The pass protection needs work, but I do worry about the injury to their key wide receiver there, because that is going to be a problem. Yeah, there's tons of games. The Indianapolis Colts have, I think, 5 division games left. So they have more than enough opportunity to rally back and win. They lost to the Houston Texans, but I think that's the only team that they faced. This is Evan calling in. Evan. What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing well.
All right. Well, we're going to skip ahead right now to talk about the Cleveland Browns. Okay, on the line, guys, Evan Silva. We're going to talk about the Cleveland Browns. I'll come back to some statistics on Adrian Peterson. Evan, I do want to talk about Adrian Peterson, and I do want to talk a little bit about the opportunity index, but we'll come back to that. Talk to me a little bit about the Cleveland Browns, Evan. We know that they fired Hugh Jackson. We know that they fired Todd Haley. I showcased on Twitter about some of that play calling that Todd Haley was doing, and was highly guilty of some of the bad and bonehead type decisions about too much running the ball after a first and 10 incompletion on second and 10, too much running the ball after a sack on first and 10, just passing the ball all the time on third and short, third and like 1 to 2 yards to go, and they're 100% pass, the only team in the league. Just ridiculous play calling from Todd Haley. And we said in Pittsburgh that he basically tries to just have good players and win that way, as opposed to game planning against an opponent, strategizing, boosting up players that aren't quite as talented. Talk to me a little bit about the decision to fire these guys and your opinion of that first and foremost, and we'll take it from there.
I just think that Todd Haley was a replacement level offensive coordinator, and he's only as good as the players that he has. And when he happened to be in Arizona with Kurt Warner and Larry Fitzgerald and Anquan Bolden, he happened to have a good offense. And when he was in Pittsburgh with, Big Ben and Le'Veon Bell in his prime and Antonio Brown and, Juju Smith-Schuster last year, he happened to have a good offense. And, now that his players are not as good, he has a bad offense. So that's, dictionary definition of a replacement level offensive coordinator. And it seemed like they just, with Hugh Jackson, they just couldn't get over their differences, which I thought were clearly stirring on Hard Knocks during training camp. Those guys were just never going to be able to coexist. So they just got rid of both of them. Hugh Jackson was just the stone cold worst of the worst as a head coach, and he should have been fired on Halloween last year. Not the guy that they fired at that time. I think that these guys' removal is nothing but positive for the Browns, and I'm excited to see what Freddie Kitchens can do. You pushed out that YouTube show on him, and he's an easy guy to root for.
Yeah, so to dictate a little bit, or to talk a little bit about how the Browns were so bad, just listen to these statistics, guys, because turnovers are really like the number one easiest statistic to define wins and losses. They're very difficult to predict and model predictively, but they do correlate tremendously to wins and losses. The Browns this season are plus 11 in turnover margin, yet they have a 2-5-1 record through 8 weeks. Since 2006, there have only been 38 teams that have been at least plus 8. So the Browns are up here at plus 11, okay? Teams that are at least plus 8 in turnover margin through 8 weeks, none of them have a losing record. Yet somehow the Browns way up here are the only team to have a losing record. Since 1975, 71 teams have been at plus 11 or better. That's where the Browns are. And none of those 71 teams have had a losing record since 1975, except for the Browns. And the other crazy thing about the Browns, I tweeted out some of this earlier, but 8 overtime games with Hugh Jackson. Now, normally you think, hey, we tied a game in regulation, maybe we will be in, we should be a coin flip almost, right? It depends who gets the ball, but that's largely determined by a coin flip. So we should be even odds to do something in this game. And yet they're 1-6-1 in overtime. They've won 1 of 8 games in overtime with Hugh Jackson, which is ludicrous. I mean, that's horrific, Evan. Really bad. So I agree with you. If you guys hadn't seen that video, I think it was actually filmed last year by NFL Films, a really good video. Check the Twitter timeline and you can find it there. A great video on their new OC, who seems like a really easy guy to root for, a very down-to-earth guy. But Evan, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you think about Greg Williams retaining his role there and obviously getting a slight bump. What do you think of him and the fact that they decided to get rid of these other guys but not Greg Williams?
I mean, I think Greg Williams is terrible. So I don't understand why they have the talent to be able to generate pressure with their front four, yet they continue to blitz at this ridiculous rate. I don't know why they play so much base defense on passing downs. I don't know why they run Myles Garrett and Larry Ogunjobi into the ground. These guys are both well out in front of any other players in the NFL in terms of snaps played. They use hardly any rotation up in the defensive front seven, and these guys are going to get worn out sooner rather than later, and they're not going to be effective in the second half of the season. I don't know why they cut Carl Nassib, who would have been a very good rotational player for them at both defensive end and defensive tackle. I mean, they do everything wrong. They're not a well-run team, and they need to make some changes. And we got the ball rolling here today. There's a reason that they suck. There are major reasons that they suck, and coaching is very, very much foremost among them.
Yep, no, I definitely agree. I hope that they get organized with Baker Mayfield to move forward, because there have been games where he hasn't looked comfortable, he hasn't looked confident. Perhaps that's in the game plan, perhaps that's in the play calling. So I'm hoping that a quick change will at least get him settled in so that he can have a better experience the last half of this year, and then they can figure out what they're going to do in the off season and get things rolling for his second year, because it's very important to have, when you have a quarterback like that, to have some good experiences. And I feel like they need to start stacking a few of those this last half of the season. Evan, we were talking on the phone last night about, after the games ended, about Adrian Peterson, among other things. We were running through a lot of different things, but Adrian Peterson, first down in the first half of the last 3 weeks, this team, the Washington Redskins, has gone 64% run, well above average, almost like to a predictable level. And this was sort of a fear of mine coming into the season with Adrian Peterson, is that they're going to run the ball too much, too predictably on first downs in the first half. But he's produced a 56% success rate on those runs, the third best in the NFL. This team has done extremely well, and then the next 2 weeks they play the 31st run defense of the Falcons and the 21st run defense of the Buccaneers. It's very uncanny, the performance that such a older guy like Adrian Peterson is just reincarnated here in the league. What do you make of Adrian Peterson?
Yeah, I was just looking at his success rate, his overall success rate right now on Football Outsiders. Out of 38 running backs with at least 56 carries on the season, his success rate is actually pretty or maybe like 75 to 80% of what he was in his prime. The Redskins' offensive line, when they keep it healthy, and it's been healthy for the most part. Trent Williams did suffer a thumb injury last week, but Dr. Chow is saying that he's probably not going to miss any time. But when they have had their guys in the front five healthy, they've been really good in both pass protection and in run blocking. Brandon Scherf has been outstanding in particular. The first round pick from a couple years ago. And that's the way that they're going to play their offense. I think that they view Alex Smith as a low volume game manager. Their defense is pretty solid. They've got some great guys up front. Ryan Kerrigan, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Preston Smith. Zach Brown is having one of his better seasons at inside linebacker. Josh Norman has been playing pretty well. So that's the way that they are going to. That's the way that they're going to, play is like a run-heavy team. Jay Gruden talked about it last week in his press conference. They want to be a run-heavy offense and a defense that stops the run, which is a very old-school, conventional thinking way to play football. But hey, man, if you have the pieces, you can make it work. And so far, it's not like they're beating great teams by any means. But they are making it work. So we'll see how it goes.
I will caution you on that stat that you're mentioning there, because I believe what Football Outsiders is doing and looking at the full game, and Adrian Peterson in the second half on these games where they're leading, their runs are not as successful. If you isolate just the first half, every carry, forget the downs, every carry, out of the 26 running backs in the league that have at least 40 attempts in the first half of the game, Adrian Peterson has a 52% success rate, which is 8th best out of these 26 running backs. Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara, Phillip Lindsay, Sony Michel, Joe Mixon, Marshawn Lynch, who's out now, Todd Gurley. Those are the only guys that are in front of him. And he is averaging 4.4 yards per carry. So, this team, that's why I thought that they were going to have a lot of success against the Giants. And I do think on the ground, I'm just worried about them burning him out a little bit, to be honest with you, Evan, because that's a big concern.
He's old. He had 27 touches on Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. I think that they can't afford to do that. But the problem is they're not getting much out of Alex Smith. Alex Smith has been, I would say, and I think that people in DC too would probably say, he hasn't met the expectations really of what this team was expecting out of him. And Jay Gruden is challenging him more. But for their sake, I hope he improves, because he really hasn't been up to par, I would say.
They have no downfield passing game.
No.
You can look at just Jordan Reed's yards per catch, for an example. All he catches are dump offs. They cannot get him going downfield at all. He had 12 targets and 39 yards on Sunday. Everything is just a check down. So it's not a fun passing game to watch. That's for sure.
No, and I don't feel bad, but I feel frustrated that you finally have Jordan Reed healthy, right? What's been the knock on Jordan Reed? He hasn't been able to be healthy. You finally get this guy healthy, he's playing, and you're not using him effectively. You're not using him in the ways that you should. And I understand they're 5-2. So the thing around the league, though, Evan, my opinion is that too many teams coach based on their record, coach based upon the scoreboard, as opposed to simply trying to do efficient things constantly and just continue to look into the metrics and the statistics to figure out ways that they can make themselves better. Regardless of what they're doing now or in the past this year, keep trying to get better. So don't settle. Oh, well, we're 5-2, so it's okay to keep doing this. The issue is, how are you going to win in the postseason? That's the goal, right? How are you going to get to the postseason and win? Do we think that what they're doing currently is a formula to have success in the playoffs? And if it's not, you need to continue to try to reinvent yourself and challenge yourself to get better. They need to get Jordan Reed more incorporated. As you mentioned, they need to get more downfield passing. They need to improve those things. I fully agree with you there. Let's talk briefly about tonight's matchup, which is going to kick off in like 20 minutes here. The Patriots taking on the Bills. Evan, what do you think is the matchup that could determine the outcome of this game?
I mean, are the Bills going to be able to score points? Something that they do very often this year. They scored 13 points or fewer in 5 of 7 games. And, you know, the under keeps getting hit. It's what, 40, a little bit of 44.5, down to 43.5 in some spots. On the board, I mean, functional offenses can score against the Patriots. Functional offenses can move the ball against the Patriots. You know, are they going to be able to get LaShawn McCoy? The Patriots have allowed 4.5 yards per carry to running backs this year. They're without Dante Hightower, one of their starting linebackers. You know, are the Bills going to be able to stay in position in this game, keep the game close? You know, as 14-point home underdogs and feed LaShawn McCoy. I think that's their ticket to being able to give the Patriots a fight. You know, I mean, I don't know. I think that there definitely is a chance that could play out. That the Bills could surprise us a little bit, but I mean, I also think that they could just get run over. They're a really, really bad team.
Yeah, I mean, the Buffalo Bills have scored 31 points total in their last 4 games combined. The Patriots have scored over 31 in each of the last 4 games. So that's obviously, I mean, we know that. We know that that's a problem for the Bills offense. They got to figure out a way, like you mentioned, to put points up on the board. What do you think? Do you envision, what style of play do you envision the Patriots playing? We know that they're obviously without Sony Michel. They are going to be without for some period of time Josh Gordon due to him missing some practices or being late to some practices. What do you think that we're going to get out of their game plan tonight?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've thought about this a lot. I think that they may come out throwing the ball a ton and try to like build a lead. You know, try to jump out ahead real quickly. And then, you know, I think that as the game progresses, I think that we're going to see some Kenyon Barner tonight. I think that we will see him get double-digit touches, and I'll be interested to see how much he actually does end up with. They only have two active running backs tonight because Sony Michel is out, and so they only have James White and Kenyon Barner. With Josh Gordon, you know, I heard from a guy that it's not looking good for him right now in New England, and that's one of the reasons that they're still trying to acquire a wide receiver.
Really? Hold up. This is big. This is big because Brady's been doing nothing but pump up Josh Gordon, and I don't know if that's motivation to try to get him, you know, like focused and ready. But what is I mean, obviously whatever you're able to share, but get into detail
like,
a little
I'm not
bit.
a reporter, you know. I just heard something that they, you know, that I mean, you can kind of connect the dots yourself. I mean, there are multiple reports that the Patriots want to trade for, that they've been looking into Demaryius Thomas, Golden Tate, and Josh Gordon was tardy 2 times last week, according to reports. You know, he's going to be benched for the first quarter of this game. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you know, you don't need, you know, me or anybody else to tell you that, you know, there are warning signs here that Josh Gordon maybe won't be long for New England. I mean, it's going to depend. I think there's probably one more misstep, and that'll do it.
Well, for his sake, let's hope that doesn't happen. I mean, this is the best situation he's been in to win in a long time, right? So this is every player's goal, is to win games. You play the sport to have success, personal, but as a team. And this is his best chance to have success as a team. So I hope that he gets himself organized. But all right, let's jump to the this week. What is one of the biggest surprises that you saw in the games this past weekend?
One of the biggest surprises was, I know. I think that it was kind of a chalky week, wasn't it? I would say that.
I would say a commentator just pointed it out. But what about the Carolina Panthers kind of rolling the Baltimore Ravens? I mean, the Baltimore Ravens was definitely a sharp side in that game.
Yeah, that was definitely maybe the most surprising game of the week. I would say that though the Rams Packers, how slowly that game started, that was surprising. But at the end, I guess it came up two or 3 points short of the total.
Right.
But neither of those offenses really got going until the second half. And I was disappointed that the Packers did not roll out Aaron Rodgers more and get him away from Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald. I mean, you know where the pressure is coming from when you're facing the Rams. You know, why is he not rolling out like on almost every play? Those late game sacks, they came right up the middle, and he was not rolling out. And look, I know that he had hamstring and knee injuries early in the season, and he's not quite 100%, but I mean, he's only going to get more injured when he's getting freaking tackled by Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh right up the middle. Okay, so you know you have to come up with a better plan than what the Packers had.
Right. No, I agree. I agree. There was a good point that somebody made here. Let me see. Oh, let's talk real quick about the Bucks. Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick, because I was legitimately sort of surprised that Jameis Winston struggled like he did, and then that Ryan Fitzpatrick came in and had as much success as he did. I mean, I don't think that these two quarterbacks are as like opposite a spectrum as they looked in that game. Like I don't see Ryan Fitzpatrick as high as he played, and I don't see Jameis as low as he played. But the problem is that Jameis commits these mistakes, and they really shouldn't be committed. Those mistakes should not be committed against a defense like the Cincinnati Bengals. You saw what Ryan Fitzpatrick did when he came in. He was able to avoid those mistakes, but not just that. He was hitting throws and being accurate, and Jameis just is too erratic at times. But what do you make overall of that situation? They've obviously named Ryan Fitzpatrick the quarterback for next week. I think it is on a week-to-week basis. They don't really have confidence in either of these guys. But what's your take on that situation?
Yeah, I actually thought that there was a chance that they might go back to Jameis for week 9 because, you know, Ryan Fitzpatrick is clearly not the long-term answer, but at this point, the coaches are coaching for their jobs.
Yep.
And, you know, and they have to hold Jameis accountable. I mean, he made a lot of bad decisions. They were all bad decisions. None of the picks, you know, you'll see a lot of interceptions like Sam Darnold threw 3 picks in week 7. And, you know, you can go through and see, hey, Andre Roberts ran a bad route here. You know, Sharon Pete dropped this one, and it bounces into, you know, a defender's hands. You know, and then, you know, the third pick was clearly Sam Darnold's fault. Like, he threw into bracket coverage trying to go to Robbie Anderson. But with Jameis Winston, like, every pick that he threw was a bad pick. You know, he's trying to force things, and he's hurting his team. So you have to, like, even though he probably gives you a better shot, like, long term, and maybe even in the short term, like, you have to hold him accountable. Or else you're not holding him accountable and you're not doing your job as a coach.
Yep. No, I fully agree. Let's do this, guys. What we're going to do, since the game's going to be kicking off here in like 10 or 15, about 10 minutes, let's run through some questions for Evan. And then, Evan, I'll let you go. And then after I let go with Evan, there's one more portion of this presentation that'll go back, and we could talk about it a little bit. So stick around once we're done with these Q&As. But go ahead and fire up some questions, and we'll go ahead and give them to Evan. Evan, Gordon or Hogan tonight? I guess DFS.
Yeah, I'm playing Chris Hogan. I'm actually, I have a lot of Chris Hogan and a lot of Josh Gordon. I subbed out my Josh Gordons for Chris Hogan. I don't feel great about it by any means, but you know, where I have him, like, I don't need a whole lot of points. And then I'm also playing Chris Hogan in the single game DFS
Okay. What is your take on Aaron Jones moving forward in the running back situation in Green Bay?
Yeah. If he was promising for him.
Your phone is cutting up a little bit. Sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Right?
you're perfect now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that it was promising that the usage went up against the Rams. We saw again, he showed us again that he's an excellent runner. They don't use him in the passing game very much. But I think that the arrow is pointing up, and we can look at him now as like an RB2/flex, whereas entering last week, we could only really look at him as like a risky flex play. So I think that the arrow is pointing up on him.
Okay, real quick. Do we know how long Lane Johnson for the Eagles is out? And if he is out for an extended time, what is your outlook on the Eagles without him? Do you have any?
The Eagles are going into their bye right now, so that is good. That's good timing for the off week. But he has a high ankle sprain and a sprained MCL on the same leg. So, I mean, according to reports, it looks like he's going to miss multiple weeks, but at least one of those will be the bye week. If they can't get him back, I think that every game that he misses, it's going to be a severe downgrade for the offense. And also, we will need to adjust for what team they're facing. Do they have a strong left defensive end that can exploit his absence? Because that's where he plays. He plays right tackle and he faces off with left defensive ends.
Right. Any thoughts on Josh Adams?
Yeah, I think that he's a guy that you could own in Dynasty. He worked ahead of Corey Clement last week. Wendell Smallwood was the number one. Darren Sproles is going to be back at some point. I think that Josh Adams is like a Dynasty or deep league guy.
Okay. Guys, just so you know, when you're asking questions, I'm skipping over some that are like hypothetical, like if this player is traded, what do you think of the guy who would play his role, and what do you think about Le'Veon Bell? We're not going to speculate, so we'll answer questions about that once they do happen, but let's try to talk about things that we actually know right now. Evan, what do you think about the NFC East in general? To me, it's very much up in the air. I mean, the Giants obviously are out of it, but I don't think that there's a ton of variance and separation between those other three teams. I think on any given Sunday they can game plan. I probably would put the Redskins and the Cowboys neck and neck, and the Eagles a slight step ahead of both of them. But it's very narrow.
I would too. The Eagles have been on the negative side of variance in the close games, and the Redskins have been on the positive side of variance in close games, and we could easily see that flip in the second half of the year. I mean, I think that ultimately the Eagles have issues. They have legitimate issues. They do not have a vertical presence in the passing game. Their running game has been weak. They have an incredible amount of injuries. Their secondary is a problem. They're not even remotely the team that we saw win the Super Bowl last year. That much is very clear. But I think that they have more talent. They're better coached than the Cowboys and the Redskins.
Right. No, I would agree with you there. Who steps up now that Will Fuller is out? We talked a little bit before about how the AFC South and where the power lies there, but I think the loss of Will Fuller is something that the Texans are going to miss. But what do you think that they do there?
Yeah, it really hurts. I mean, he's a true difference maker. Very much like Deshaun Jackson, who, you go back and look at Kirk Cousins splits with and without Deshaun Jackson. He's a much better player with Deshaun Jackson. You go back and look at Nick Foles with and without Deshaun Jackson, way more productive when he had Deshaun Jackson on the field. And Will Fuller has been like that too with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson has been way better with Will Fuller on the field. What happens when he misses time, and we have a decent sample on Will Fuller missing time, is that first and foremost, DeAndre Hopkins gets more targets. He will probably be a little bit less efficient because teams are going to really lock down on him, but he's going to get targets to compensate for that. And then Kiki QT, who missed the Week 7 game with an aggravated hamstring, or the Week 8 game with an aggravated hamstring injury, he needs to get healthy. He's got a really big opportunity ahead of him. They need to get him healthy. But then guys lower down. See, this is a team that I think should be trying to trade for a receiver by the deadline, I believe, is tomorrow. This is a team that should be trying to trade for a receiver because, you look further down the depth chart, it's guys like Vincent Smith and, they've been using a running back, Tyler Irvin, even at receiver.
What do you make of, real quick, we'll take two more. What do you make of Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks right now?
I think that they're playing really efficient football. I mean, Russell Wilson has 9 touchdowns on his last 54 pass attempts. That's just an absurd rate and not something that's sustainable, but he's playing at a really, really high level. You can't deny that. They've found a gem in David Moore, 7th round pick last year, and he's been a playmaker for them. They are running the ball really, really effectively. They still have issues in pass protection for sure, but when you can run the ball efficiently and you have a super efficient quarterback who can make the most of his opportunities, you can kind of work around those pass protection deficiencies. And their defense has been solid. I mean, their defense has been not great, but solid. I think that they're a very above average defense. A lot of new pieces, a lot of young players. But yeah, I mean, I think that they're better than most people, including myself, probably anticipated.
And by the way, we got notification here. I'm seeing on Twitter, and some of you guys were mentioning here. Josh Gordon was starting tonight. Evan, he actually started. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
I'm not sure what those reports were about, but that's pretty interesting. Last question, Evan, and then we'll let you go. Did you have a chance yet? I know last night you and I were talking. We didn't have a chance to break down Byron Leftwich's new offense for the Arizona Cardinals. We had both watched a little bit of it, but hadn't been able to get I have to go back and watch it. I don't know if you have had a chance to do that. Have you?
The Cardinals game?
Yeah.
I watched it yesterday, yeah.
So what is your take on that offense with him now as opposed to with McCoy out? Like, how much do you think that offense improved?
Pulling up my notes here. So the first thing that stood out was that they used way more screens. That was a huge part of the game plan, throwing screen passes to David Johnson and to wide receivers. They used a lot more max protection, and Byron Leftwich is aware that they have major pass protection problems. So that was one way that they combated it. And then another thing that stood out is that Josh Rosen got the ball out of his hands quickly. Looked at it on Next Gen Stats. He averaged 2.36 seconds in Week 8 to getting the ball out. And that was his fastest all season. So now they go into their Week 9 bye, and they can continue to work on things. And, as a coach, I think that your goal is to maximize your strength and to minimize your weaknesses. And, the first step in that is identifying what your weaknesses are. And I think that Byron Leftwich has a very clear sense of what the Cardinals' weaknesses are. And that's, the first step toward getting better.
I would agree. All right, guys, I'm going to let Evan go, but I'm still going to be on here for a couple more minutes talking about some other things. So stick around. But Evan, thanks again for joining us, guys. If you're not following Evan, I'm not sure what you're doing, but at Evan Silva on Twitter. Evan, thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.
All right, guys. Obviously great to talk to Evan each week. I wanted to go back because I introduced something on Twitter this week called the Opportunity Index. And maybe you guys were able to see that. I'm not sure. But what I did is it's and you guys don't have to read all of this. But what I did is I'm doing this new thing where I am looking at the schedule for the prior 3 weeks and comparing that to the team that you're facing this very next week, and looking for spots where a team is facing much easier or much harder competition as compared to what they faced the last few weeks. Because I believe that most people have extreme bias to what they just saw. And especially when that happens for a few weeks, like you play a very difficult team for a few weeks in a row, people are going to think after 3 weeks of that you're a certain X-rated team. And then you finally get to play a team that's significantly easier. And guess what? You might have the opportunity to do more than what your current expectations are. So what I did is I'm just going to run through this very quickly. We're not going to do this every single week. I just want to kind of outline it. But I will be tweeting these things out, these graphics out each week, probably on like Wednesday, to let you know the spots for passing offense and rushing offense where I think teams and or players, starting running back, etc., are in good positions to exceed their expectations because of a big jump in difficulty of opponent. So, for instance, the buys that I had on the list for this last week, I tweeted this out probably on Friday, I think, but we're going to start doing a little bit earlier. The Broncos face the easiest run defense after playing defenses that average 19th. And obviously we know they were down to just one running back so they could isolate the carries, but total of 112 yards, 5.3 yards per carry on the ground, a touchdown, and a 67% success rate. The Redskins was another team where they had been facing run defenses the prior 3 weeks that ranked 8th overall in the league. So they might play like the number 1, the number 16, the number 8. Tougher run defense. Now they get to play the number 22. We obviously know Adrian Peterson, 2 total touchdowns, 1 came on the ground, 156 total yards, and 5.7 yards per carry. So a lot of opportunity for him to exceed expectations last week against the Giants as compared to what he'd done in the past. Again, this is not isolating just which players have the easiest matchup. You can go to my strength of schedule and look at that very quickly. This is attacking it from a different perspective based upon the recency bias. The Rams, we know Todd Gurley every single week. He typically crushes, but they played a much easier run defense. He posted 195 total yards, 4.6 yards per carry. The one that didn't live up to the expectations would be the Chiefs. Hunt, 86 total yards, but only 3.1 yards per carry on the ground. Denver did a great job of stuffing the run. Even though they're the 29th ranked run defense, they really did a great job. Denver really does seem to know how to play good defense against the Chiefs. From a passing perspective, these are the 4 teams that I identified. The Vikings, the Colts, the Raiders, and the Bengals. So the Raiders-Colts game, there were 2 teams there. And we'll talk first about the Vikings. Kirk Cousins, 359 passing yards, 8.8 yards per attempt. He threw for 2 touchdowns, one of his better performances of the year, but obviously it came in a losing effort, but still a very solid performance against the weakness of the Saints. They should have passed the ball more, as we discussed earlier in the show. The Indianapolis Colts, 3 touchdowns from Luck, a 127 passer rating, 61% of his passes were successful. The Raiders, a lot of people, they got rid of Amari Cooper, probably weren't so high on the Raiders, but 3 touchdowns, 8.7 yards per attempt, and a 137 passer rating. So the Raiders were a pretty good hit. The Bengals, I would say that was a push / slightly below average, but when you consider the wind and the conditions there, it made for a more difficult passing day in Cincinnati. So you obviously have to temper expectations when it comes to the weather. The teams that I expected to do worse than projected or worse than what you saw from a passing perspective, the Pittsburgh Steelers. 2 touchdowns and 1 interception from Ben Roethlisberger, only 257 yards passing, only 7.1 yards per attempt. It was still a good day from Ben, but just not really exceeding your expectations. A little bit step down, but still an okay day. The Jets, very poor. Obviously, the Jets did not play very well. Sam Darnold struggled tremendously going up against the number one pass defense after playing defenses that averaged 19th. That really wasn't that surprising. The Jaguars, 7 yards per attempt, a 42% success rate, 1 touchdown for Blake Bortles. But what is Blake Bortles? His ceiling's not that high to begin with, so that's not really all that surprising. Cam Newton, 2 touchdowns, only 219 yards passing. So he was a player that we thought, he does have the rushing element though. So if you're looking just strictly daily fantasy here, he did get a rushing touchdown. One of the passes was a batted ball that Christian McCaffrey was able to catch and score. So you did have that edge going for you. Let's see. I'm not sure what happened to the slide for the rushing, but at any rate, the rushing was similar. So I will go ahead and tweet out the next 4 weeks. The next week's opportunity index probably on Wednesday. So that's going to be a good idea to pay attention to from daily fantasy, from a sports betting perspective, give you guys a little bit of an edge moving forward. Another thing, some of your questions earlier, maybe you guys have dropped off by now, but they'll catch it on replay if they're watching a football game tonight, is the YouTube show. I didn't put out the YouTube show last week, but I am going to continue to try to do the YouTube show on Fridays, identifying like 5 or 6 matchups based on schedule, based on other metrics up at Sharp Football Stats that you need to be aware of. So subscribe on YouTube and you'll get an alert every time that I post a video up there on YouTube. So I will continue to try to do that. Otherwise, we have the Week 9 Sharp Football Analysis podcast that's going to be recorded Friday night with Dr. Chow and Evan Silva, so you can look forward to that as well. And like I mentioned, the Sharp Football Stats website is fully updated through last night's game, so you can, I haven't tweeted it out yet, but you can get all your box score information, start analyzing all the other statistics that are up there, all that is current through last night's game. So with that said, guys, thanks once again to tuning in. Looking forward to doing these every single week, sharing some new information. Oh, and by the way, Troy Aikman, some of you guys might have seen last week, there was a little bit of back and forth with Troy Aikman. We are hopeful that we are going to be able to get Troy Aikman on the show with us at some point in the near future. Maybe a slight long shot, but actually he did reach out to me, and so we are conversing. So hopefully I'm going to speak with him this week, and we're going to try to set something up. We'll see. So that would be awesome if we can make that happen. Troy Aikman will be on the podcast if possible, but he's definitely not going to listen to it after the fact. He'll guest on podcasts, but he doesn't listen to them. So we'll see if anything happens there. But thanks again, guys. Appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate your questions. Enjoy watching the game, and we'll talk to you soon.